Solomon wrote under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit in Scripture many wise words about counseling. He wrote in Proverbs 11:14, "Where there is no counsel, the people fall. But in the multitude of counselors, there is safety." If you are in ministry, it's not a matter of if you'll need counseling or if you need to counsel someone else, but when. Dûane Schoonard, a pastor and counselor, will help us with real counseling resources for pastors and ministry leaders. You're watching Ministry in Motion, where we explore best practices for your ministry in the 21st century. Welcome, Dûane, to Ministry in Motion.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Let's jump right in.
Okay.
So, it's not a matter of if, but when. In general, people will need counseling, or I may need to be counseled. So, what is it about acknowledging that and the limitations that come with that?
Well, it's difficult for any of us, I think, to acknowledge our limitations, isn't it?
Yes.
But pastoral education is really limited in many respects. You're being taught to be a preacher. You're taught to be a theologian, to be able to argue the faith. And there very little training or emphasis is placed on pastoral care or on counseling skills.
I think I had one class.
You were lucky. You were lucky. So the number one thing that I hear from pastors out there is their struggle, that they don't know how to deal with the complexity of issues that people come to them with, or the labyrinth of the interpersonal dynamics that happen in a congregation.
Yeah. Keep going with that. The whole limitations issue.
Yes. Well, the fact that pastors are put up here on a pedestal and they're supposed to know everything and, expected to have the answers to all people's issues, of course, people turn to them. And really, they need to be able to say, this is beyond my scope.
Wow.
And, to be humble enough to say to people, this is more complicated than my skill level.
And some pastors may have a super caregiving personality where they believe they can help everyone, and some go beyond, they can fix everyone. And recognizing the limitations, if I hear you saying correctly, is the first step towards getting the right kind of help. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. People's issues are more complicated than they may appear on the surface. Just for instance, a couple may come to you and say, we're having communication issues.
Yes.
When in reality, well, first, my perspective is it's never a problem of communication. It's just a problem that people don't like the message they're being sent. But underneath that, what they perceive as the problem is that two individuals have come together, perhaps both of them having trauma, and how they interact with each other is symptomatic of that. And a pastor may not know how to walk that journey into those deeper chapters of a person's life and unpack that in a way. It's like they can give a surface answer and maybe give us some communication techniques, but can they solve the deeper issues of the heart that are creating the problem in the first place?
So, Dûane, help alleviate a lot of frustration. What is a pastor to do then with not only all of the personalities, all of the generations, there may be disorders mentally, There may be biochemical. I mean, all kinds of people sit in the congregations. And if the pastor only has, like me, one class in counseling, what would you recommend they do?
Well, I recommend, I live near a university and lots of theology students there, and I interact with them frequently. The number one thing that I tell them is make sure you take a class in abnormal psychology.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
Because so often pastors are dealing with serious mental illness and they don't know it.
Right.
So can you diagnose a bipolar disorder or a personality disorder, character disorder? Are you dealing with someone with a thought disorder? And often, our congregations are places where the brokenhearted come.
Sure.
And I heard from a pastor recently who is in a congregation where there's a lot of brokenness, and he wants to move on, But the truth is, he's in a very place that God himself would be walking, because these people are hurting so bad, but if you don't understand what they're going through, you're going to be offering spiritual platitudes to address much deeper issues.
I got to stop there for a moment and look at this, because sometimes people oversimplify what may be a deeper issue or deeper need.
Yes.
Help pastors with understanding that. You say go to class, maybe helping them to understand some disorders that they may come in contact with. But what about the oversimplification of an issue that may be very complex? Sometimes we gloss over using religious language.
Yes.
But really not dealing with the deep emotional issue.
Well, if you can identify that this person, for instance, has a narcissistic personality disorder. Okay, and you know what the characteristics of that are. Number one, it gives you a strategy how to respond to them. That you're going to deal with them differently than it's someone who just has depression. So it gives you a strategy, but it also immediately tells you this is out of my scope of influence or my scope of ability to handle.
Sure.
So just information helps you to know that. Did that answer your question?
It did, because sometimes we don't know, pastors don't know what they don't know.
Yes.
And so when I learn what I don't know, it may help me to recognize my limitations. I agree with that.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I definitely want to talk to you about then, when should pastors refer?
Okay.
And we'll dive into that. And I want you to know that you are blessing many people watching right now, because this is a key thing in every church, not just one church, but every church.
Yes.
We're talking with Dûane Schoonard, a pastor and a counselor. You're watching Ministry in Motion. Welcome back to Ministry in Motion. We're talking with pastor and counselor Dûane Schoonard about the whole issue of counseling, and more particularly about resources with counseling. And Dûane, when we left off, we were dealing with the very need for ministry leaders, for pastors, to know when to refer. Before we get to that, why is referral important?
Well, because of our limitations.
Okay.
We can't be superheroes in every area of our life. Your master's in theology takes you 3 years.
Yes.
A master's in in counseling takes you another 3 years. And most people don't dedicate that much time to be a specialist in mental health.
Right.
And in the complexity of the human experience. So you can't be a specialist in all those areas. So
yeah. And you know, pastoring today is multi-complex,
Yes.
and the need to refer is huge. But
Yes.
let's talk about when to refer, and then
Okay.
we need to talk about where to refer.
Okay.
But how do I know as a pastor when I am submerged over my head, and it's time to bring them to Duane Schoonard?
I say 99% of the issues that come to your table are beyond your scope as a pastor.
Wow.
We don't have the experience as theologians.
So let me jump in for a moment and ask you, is there a triage point? Should I meet with the person one time? Should a pastor meet 2 times? Is there a limit? When I refer, have I met with them at least once?
Absolutely.
Okay.
76% of people are most likely to seek a pastor as their first line of attack when they have an issue.
Okay.
So for you to give them the courtesy of listening to their story, to listen to what's going on, and at least get an idea, and maybe that would take 2 or 3 times of listening to really get to the bottom of what's going on.
Okay.
But you're only listening to be able to assess what
Okay.
kind of therapist do they need. You know, as generalists, we don't
Sure.
have time to handle all the mental health or complicated human experiences that come
Sure.
to you.
Sure.
So the basic principle I say is if you don't have specialized training in the issue that you're bringing to you,
Okay.
refer.
Okay.
So a parent is struggling with their child who has a drug addiction. You don't have the training.
Correct.
Refer. You know, or someone's coming to you and there's a porn addiction going on in the marriage.
Yes.
You don't have the training to deal with unwanted sexual behavior.
Sure.
Refer. You know, there's many issues that we address.
And have you found that referrals not only help the counselor, but also the counselee or the person needing counsel? In other words, can there be spiritual quackery if you go into waters that you're not equipped to deal with?
I often pick up the pieces in my office of inappropriate
There you go.
interactions that pastors have had. And just a simple one.
Okay.
I reviewed an article recently that was going to be printed in a professional magazine.
Yes.
And that was a story of a pastor interacting with an individual who had sexual violations. Because he didn't understand the dynamic of what happens to an individual when they have their boundaries violated, he did something that was very inappropriate, not immoral,
Sure.
just not helpful.
Got it.
Okay? And it actually ended up being destructive to him and his ministry and to the individual.
Amazing.
So when you don't have the skills and you don't understand the dynamic, you can inadvertently be saying and doing things that have a negative impact and not even intending to do that.
That's amazing. So when you get these referrals, you've experienced picking up the pieces, as it were, from people's issues that pastors maybe have dropped.
Yes.
Or what have you found to be our most challenging issues? Pastor may be listening or viewing right now, and they may be overloaded with issues. Is there a thematic thread in your own counseling practice that you see among ministers and also those they serve?
There's a growing narcissism in our culture, and it's also growing in the church. So
Wow.
there's a huge what should I say, just escalation of that issue.
Define narcissism for me.
That's kind of complicated.
Do your best.
Well, narcissism is a sense of superiority.
Okay.
There's a sense that I know better than you. And they often hide behind superior theological positions.
Wow.
And so they will, if you agree with them, they're your best friends. They're very smooth talkers. They're con artists in a profound way. But they will also, if you get on their wrong side, they will destroy everyone that doesn't agree with them. So that's an issue that I see as a growing dynamic in our churches. There is more and more drug issues, addiction issues, marital issues, parenting issues. All of those are, the church is a place for the brokenhearted.
Sure.
So they're there.
Yeah.
They're there.
Yeah, the message of Jesus to Jeremiah, the Lord sent him to the potter's house.
Yes.
And he saw the potter and the wheel, and isn't that just like people? We're broken. We are in many pieces, and hopefully the potter will be able to put us back together again. Yeah. Let's talk about referring with someone who has mental illness. Well,
can we start by the fact that you need to know what resources are in your community?
Sure, sure.
And that may take a while for you to find out, what they are. So calling up local therapists and checking in with them, inviting them out to lunch so you can interview them and know what services they provide.
Hold that thought. We're going to come right back there. That's important.
Okay.
Knowing who to refer to. You're watching Ministry in Motion. Stay tuned. Welcome back. We're talking with Dûane Schoonard about counseling. She is a counselor and a pastor. And Dûane, when we left, we were dealing with this whole area of referring. Who to refer to, what are the resources? But let me back up for a moment.
Okay.
What can a pastor or a ministry leader do for themselves?
Well, one thing that I always say is get help for yourself.
Yes.
If we don't deal with our own issues, we're most likely not be able to help someone else. And I love the passage in Corinthians, 2 Corinthians 1, verse 4.
Okay.
Starting with verse 4. Talking about God, he says, he comforts us in all of our troubles so that we can comfort others. When they are troubled, we will be able to give them the same comfort God has given us. For the more we suffer for Christ, the more God will shower us with his comfort through Christ. Even when we are weighed down with troubles, it is for your comfort and salvation. So as I invite all pastors, go and do your own work.
Yes.
That way you're going to have more keen insight into what you are addressing with other people. So I think that's really important.
Self-care.
Self-care, yes.
Yeah.
There are other training events out there specifically for pastors that are really helpful. And if you don't mind, I'd like to mention a couple of those.
Please.
The Allender Center at the Seattle School of Psychology and Theology has an excellent program called Effective Trauma Care. And it is an integration of psychology and theology like I haven't seen in any other resource that teaches you how to care for people who are brokenhearted.
Wow.
And so it's a fabulous program. There's other programs out there as well that, another important thing that I think that we need to do is to read both the individuals who are theologians and psychologists.
Okay.
Because they integrate it. So we're talking about Dr. John Townsend or Dr. Henry Cloud.
Sure.
Peter Shigaro has an excellent series of books on what an emotionally healthy leader looks like, an emotionally healthy church. And
Yes.
some of those things can be great resources for pastors. And there's many others.
We're talking about referring here. And Dûane, what do you say to the hesitant one or even the one who's very negative about having any counseling, whether it's Christian or not, but to go to someone that has also had psychological training? What would you say to that?
That's a very complicated question,
Yeah.
and one in which I think there's a lot of resistance among Christians
Sure.
to seek professional counseling. But we have to remember that good theology equals good psychology.
Okay.
That it's the same creator that made us emotional as well as spiritual individuals.
Mm-hmm.
And so, healing the emotional side of us, the broken side of us,
Yes.
is a spiritual journey. You can't grow emotionally without it growing you spiritually, or you can't grow spiritually without it growing you emotionally. They can't be separated.
No, I love that. Luke 2:52, Jesus increased in wisdom, mentally,
Yes.
stature, physically,
Yes.
and was in favor with God spiritually and man socially. So
Yes.
that is so, so true. Are there any other resources out there that you can share for our viewers?
Well, I think as Christian leaders, we need to be looking for the resources that are in our communities.
Okay.
And some of those things are like divorce care,
Yes.
like Celebrate Recovery,
Yes.
that deals with any hurt habit or, so Living Free, a program that is absolutely phenomenal. They have good presenters in the DVDs, but it's also people caring for people. It's where people who have gone through struggles with addiction are also helping people who may have an addiction, or people who have had broken marriages and have found healing are now helping people find healing. So some of those kind of programs are fabulous for Christian leaders to incorporate in their churches.
Excellent. I want you to walk a pastor or a ministry leader through the referral process. When I pick up the phone and call someone in my community, do I need to go with the person that I'm recommending? Do I need to know who I'm sending that person to? Give me a few steps here as a pastor referring someone someplace else.
Well, my first step in moving into a new community is to find out who's out there.
Okay.
And sometimes just asking around, you'll find people that are highly recommended. But I don't want to recommend someone that I don't personally know.
Okay.
So I might call someone that comes recommended, or someone that I see their advertisement, and invite them out to lunch and tell them who I am, that I often need to make referrals. I need to know who's available. And it gives me a chance to have a conversation over a meal and find out what their philosophy is and, what's their Christian perspective, so that I may not necessarily want to go with them to the therapist, but I want to know who I'm referring to.
For sure.
And know their qualifications and know that this is someone I can trust, this person that I care about.
Sure.
Too.
What is considered long-term counseling or short-term counseling? Would you be able to define that for me?
Well, in the counseling field, you might say short-term counseling maybe 6 to 18 months.
Wow.
Long-term counseling would be 3 or 4 years, maybe. And
that's amazing.
Yes.
You've given us some great resources, and I'm hoping that we can place more up on our website so that you can share where pastors and ministry leaders can go. I feel like we've just scratched the surface on this subject, but it is so rich and real. And Dûane, I thank you for being in the trenches as a pastor counselor yourself. And there's so much need today.
Yes.
Thank you for being with us on Ministry in Motion.
It's my honor. Thank you.
As a pastor or ministry leader, the gift of Christian counseling can be a huge benefit for you. Pastor and counselor Duane Schoonard shared where to begin with counseling. She said, acknowledge your limitations and then educate yourself. Number 2, she said, you should know when to refer. This is a basic principle. Refer if you have not specifically been trained in how to address the situation. Refer when there is a mental illness. Finally, she said, you should find resources in your community, and they may be different from country to country and state to state, but you should refer, and it should depend on a specific situation. Thanks so much for being with us. Sharing resources for your ministry in the 21st century is what we desire to share. Until next time, be of good courage. If God is for you, who can be against you?